Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 2. We are talking with Hanneke and Jim, who are the parents of Rebecca, who is a former patient of mine diagnosed with osteosarcoma at 7 years of age. She's now 4 years off therapy in survivorship land. So we've kept in touch over the years, and when we came up with the idea for this podcast, I reached out to them a few months back to kind of get their insight on ideas. And they were so generous with their time. I ended up talking with them for 2 hours. They gave me so many good ideas for future podcasts, which I'm so grateful for. Also, they had great insight and advice, so I asked them to come on to share some of this for new families with sarcoma for our very first episode. We ended up again talking for a long time, so this is broken up into 2 episodes as well, with this first episode primarily discussing new diagnosis of sarcoma and insights that they learned and advice for families. I hope you all enjoy. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Dr. Lisa Kopp.
And I'm Dr. Wendy Allen Rhodes, and we are the Sarcoma Sisters.
We are friends, moms, wine enthusiasts, and pediatric oncologists.
That means that we take care of kids, teenagers, and young adults with cancer.
We know that cancer is confusing and scary.
And our patients tell us that it's even harder to find information about sarcomas. So we are bringing the experts to you to talk about all the things.
Well, all the things important to you.
Thank you so much for listening.
All right, let's get started. Hey everyone, we have to add in this part every time for the lawyers. The content that you're listening to on the Sarcoma Sisters podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. As you all know, we have the utmost respect for your oncology medical team. And we know that they know you and what is going on with your health the best. So we want to leave all those decisions up to them. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. So we want to welcome Hanneke and Jim Mader to our podcast today. We're really grateful that the two of you have joined us, Wendy and myself. So just a little background. I had the honor and privilege of taking care of Hanneke and Jim's daughter, Rebecca, a few years back. And I had talked to them when Wendy and I decided to start this podcast because I wanted to get some input from parents about things that they would want to hear about on our show. And I think I mentioned in the first episode, it was not the same things I thought. So that's why we need input from all of you. So anyway, welcome you both to our show.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yay! And again, we want to say happy birthday because it's Jim's birthday. So first of all, to kick things off, I just wanted to know if you could share with all of us kind of Rebecca and your family's journey.
Well, I guess I'll kind of provide a little bit of the story. So Rebecca had trouble standing up. Mm-hmm. She was kind of like, she said, "Oh, my knee hurts," and she was kind of like, you know, kids playing on the floor, and then she would try and stand up, and she would kind of struggle a bit, like her knee hurt. And on a Monday morning, and we had seen this through the weekend, and on Monday morning, Hanneke asked me to take a look at Rebecca's knee, and I remember looking at it and going, that doesn't look quite right. And Rebecca, of course, is not a big girl. She's quite petite. And looking at her knee, I just felt like something wasn't right. You know, I remember looking at it, and it didn't look like, you know, if you banged your knee, you know, usually it would kind of like swell. You know, your knee swells up when you injure your knee, and this didn't. It didn't look like that. So Hanneke took Rebecca into the pediatrician, and the pediatrician said, "Wow, that's, you know, we need to get an X-ray. Maybe it's rheumatoid arthritis." Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was like, 7-year-old rheumatoid. Maybe, I guess. Okay. So Hanneke brought her, the doctor referred her for an x-ray, and Hanneke took her to the local hospital, and they took the x-ray and immediately saw something and brought her in for a CAT MRI, and they did the MRI. And in the middle of that, Hanneke had called me at work, and I immediately went to the hospital. They were in the MRI, and I sat there. And while of course the machine's doing its thing, the radiologist came and got me and said, this is, I think this is some kind of sarcoma. And I said, but is it possible it could be anything else? And he said, well, I hope so. But when we see this, we have to refer it. So he brought me into the back, into their, I don't know what the radiologist calls it, a lab, where they've got all of the, the screens and everything. And he starts showing me, the x-rays and explaining this is why I think it's sarcoma and why I think you need to go see a oncologist soon. And of course, that's when there's the pit of your stomach kind of drops down. And nothing is the same after that. It's that's kind of the point at which you go through the looking glass in Alice in Wonderland, and not in a good way. So we did that. We got a referral, and I forget who the referral was, up to see you. Was it through the hospital, or was it through your pediatrician? The pediatrician. And I believe we actually had to wait 2 or 3 days for the appointment.
Thursday.
And of course, not understanding, sarcomas, we were like on a knife's edge the entire time, thinking that we were losing time. So that 2 or 3 days later, it's kind of all a blur. We walked into your office and sat down. And to that end, with regard to the time frame, that was actually, I remember, one of the first things you telling us was that this was not like leukemia, where we need to immediately start treatment, that we had a little bit of time. And then you referred us off for a number of tests and getting the port set up, I believe, as well. So that's kind of the quick snapshot of how we got to you.
I have a question for you. Yeah. When the radiologist said that it looked like sarcoma, had you ever heard that word before?
So I'll start. So when we went in for the x-ray, it's like your normal x-ray, right? You get on the table, they take the pictures, they look at you and say, oh, your doctor will get back to you, when we have the results. The x-ray tech did not do that. She literally got up and walked out of the room. And I knew in that moment something wasn't right. Mm-hmm. And I remember the radiologist coming back in, and he said, we need to, or she brought in the radiologist, we need to get an MRI. And I said, why? Well, because there's something that we need to investigate. Why? And obviously for legal reasons, he's not allowed to tell me. And it's a little bit blurry, but I know I kept asking him why. And he finally broke down and said, I think it's cancer. I said, okay, let's go to the MRI. Well, that's not really how it works. We have to get a referral and it's going to take time. I said, no, we have to do this now. And just at that moment, his nurse came in and said, we have a cancellation this afternoon. Can you take this slot? Well, of course. So then obviously we were together for the MRI. He said cancer to me after his meeting, after he met Jim and told him what he was looking at. He said sarcoma. I knew nothing about sarcoma. I only knew about cancer, and I knew it was bad.
I knew based on the word what that meant, as far as in broad terms of it being sarcoma. As far as the specifics of what sarcoma was as opposed to other types of cancer, I had no idea. And that's and Dr. Kopp taught me quite a bit about what sarcoma was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, a lot of my patients always tell me, I've never heard that word before. I didn't know what it was. And even as far as I didn't even know that kids could get cancer, and it's their first real experience. They may have had a family member that's had breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon, et cetera, et cetera.
So Jim is very much the I need to know all the information kind of guy. For me, the 2 hours that we had between the X-ray and the MRI, I started Googling, and it was bad. And I got extremely overwhelmed. And I remember Jim saying, okay, put the phone away. You can't look at this anymore. I will tell you what you need to know, because he knows me and he knows what information I need. But everything out there can be extremely overwhelming, because you see the good, the bad, and the ugly on the internet. And so he did all the research and then gave me the information I needed.
And Hanneke, you said you were Googling a lot, and then Jim was helping you understand and filter some of that information before you got into Dr. Kopp's office. Where were you guys finding the information?
So I just went into the Google search bar and popped in the 2 options that we had been given, basically.
Ewing's or osteo, right?
Ewing's. Well, and Rebecca doesn't even fall. So osteosarcoma is rare. And then she doesn't even fall in the typical category, right? I mean, it's teenagers and usually boys. She was a girl of 7 years old. So her category was even smaller. And when you go into that Google search bar, I mean, anytime you go into that Google search bar, you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And within minutes, I was completely overwhelmed, and I couldn't. I'm glad Jim told me to put it away. It was like almost like a train wreck. Like, you want to get all the information, but it was so overwhelming that my brain couldn't process the information.
What was your conversations with Rebecca as all of this was happening? What did those look like? If you feel comfortable telling us, if you don't, it's totally fine also.
Oh, I remember the conversations. And I think that it was, it's hard to explain cancer because we as adults have at least a general idea. Those of us not in the profession have at least a general idea of what that means. Kids generally have no clue, especially at that age. And so for us, it was a series of conversations. It wasn't just one conversation, as it is with most kids with most tough subjects. So I remember, that day talking to her about the MRI. Okay, there's something going on in your leg. We don't know what it is. And then a few days later, having a conversation about there's a disease in your leg, specifically, and being able to show her the picture and saying, you see this white spot here? That is not supposed to be there. And so, as we progressed, we prepared her as much as we could for whatever steps, whether it was the MRI or the biopsy, just in baby steps to give her some understanding of what it meant.
Yeah. And I know Rebecca has 2 older sisters. So when you had these conversations, I'm curious, were they as everybody as a family every time? Or was it in the beginning as a family and then, or how, and I know the girls are obviously all different ages. So I was just wondering how you all manage that.
So at the time, Rebecca was 7, Juliana was 9, and Catherine was 11. And we had initially, Jim had separate conversations with Juliana and Catherine. Jim being the stable one, me being the emotional wreck. It was better for him to have those conversations with them. And, they went with us where we went. So when we went up to Phoenix to go to for the biopsy, they went with us. They were in the room. So they experienced a lot with us. And as we got information, Rebecca was the first to know, but then Jim would fill in her sisters as well.
I always think, because as oncologists, we deal primarily or talk with primarily parents and then the child who has the cancer. And, a lot of times SIBs will be around, but we're not having those direct conversations. And I always think about that and would think about that, like I can't imagine what it's like at home, because how it is for the other children, I would think about that a lot, how and how it splits up the family because somebody has to be in the hospital and somebody has to work, and those kind of things. I was wondering if you wanted to speak to any of those struggles and those challenges.
I think, with kids, anytime a kid sees another kid, like say with like a Band-Aid on or is getting some kind of attention, there's always kind of this jealousy that, people are paying attention to him because he has a cast on his arm and I want a cast because then people pay attention to me.
Right.
And in the beginning, there's kind of, I think, that normal childhood behavior. But then over time, when the siblings see a port get accessed, or when the chemo gets pushed and there's all of these, these uncomfortable sensations and the pain that starts developing from mucositis and all of that sort of thing. I think there's this realization that takes place that, oh, this isn't Johnny with a cast in class having kids sign it anymore. This is wholly different. And I think that there is a natural development of understanding to the siblings that I don't want any part of that. And I think that develops the sympathy, or I guess more correctly, empathy toward the sibling. Now that doesn't change anything. There's certain other things that of course are always going to come up. There's our girls used to take turns clearing the table. Well, now we've taken one person out of the work
rotation
the table, and that that's going to cause some conflict. Obviously a 9-year-old and 11-year-old in many ways don't have the ability to understand that this might not be an appropriate time to debate, the work schedule for clearing the table. Nevertheless, that's an actual discussion I remember having. Well, it was a bit more than a discussion that I remember having. Was there's only 2 people to clear the table now, and we're doing it all the time, and this isn't fair. And having to navigate those discussions can be really difficult. And like you said, we used to do 24-hour shifts. Hanneke would stay at the hospital for 24 hours, and then I would stay for 24 hours. And of course, something would come up while it was my time to be at home with the girls that obviously only mom could take care of. And only mom can take care of it, probably because she's not the one that's here.
Right.
And I'm I guess Hanneke might have had some similar experiences, but there's all of this normal stuff, and the difficulty is that the siblings are going through life, still have normal life stuff. They still have to go to class. They still have to run races in gym and get hit in the face with a dodgeball, and all of these things that are normal kid things that can be overshadowed so quickly unless you deliberately take the time to understand that their lives have in many ways continued in so many ways, and that I have to deliberately and affirmatively take part in those lives that are separate from chemo and cancer, and how that can overshadow things so darkly.
Yeah, those are really, really hard conversations, or really hard depending on developmentally where the siblings are, to understand all those things. And those are things that even as adults we all struggle with. So it's the sibling factor. I think more and more now, Lisa, you can chime in if you have thoughts on it, but I think the effect that childhood cancer has on our siblings is getting more and more recognition, and there's more research and support going into it. But I think there's still plenty of ways that we could beef up those services for our siblings, because they do bear, some of the burden of the treatment that happens in the diagnosis, for sure.
Oh,
I actually, and I've talked with other cancer parents about this, and I still believe that honesty, truth, the American way, I guess, was the best way to forward. I specifically remember Catherine asking me, "Is Rebecca going to die?" And having to have that discussion. What does it mean to have cancer? How long is this going to last? And talking to a 9-year-old and 11-year-old and providing them a truthful answer that they can understand. And at times sitting with them and crying with them because the truth was not great. And instead of, in my perspective, leaving them in a kind of misty gray world where we know stuff's not right, but we also don't know specifically what's going on, and leaving kids who are asking questions to themselves but aren't getting answers from their parents, so that they can deal with it. Now, I'm sure that I could find a psychologist that would disagree with me somewhere. This is just how I dealt with it, and I think we, as a family, given our personalities and whatnot, that worked for us.
we're learning more and more about and making our priority to include siblings and talk to them. But a lot of times, depending on your child's personality, they're not going to ask the question. So, it's important what you all did, which is to have those conversations and to just be upfront and honest, and that's all you can do. And like you said, to be vulnerable with your children.
And I think too, so we were really lucky because I was not working. And so I was able to be physically with Rebecca, and Jim's work was really great during this whole time so that we could do the 24-hour rotation, because it wasn't like I was gone for, a week at a time. We were able to rotate with the kids, with each other, so that we could be with the other two. We always made sure that whoever was going home for the night would be there in time for dinner. Dinner time is really important to our family. All meal times we eat together. And so to sit at dinner and talk to them about their day and then be able to put them to bed in the evening, those were really important things. We also were really lucky that my mom moved in during the time that Rebecca was being treated. And so we were able to have a stable person for the girls. So because our hospital was 77 miles away, wasn't right next door. And my mom was able to be there when they, she could put them on the bus. She could pick them up from school. She could take them to their music lessons. She could do all the other activities with them, take them to the library. And that was, for us, really good. The other thing is that we also tried to involve the girls as much as possible, not in a forceful way, but hey, Rebecca's going to be in the hospital for a week. You want to come spend the night one night, on like the weekend, for example. And we were lucky that our hospital allowed that. But this gave the girls a little bit of insight into what Rebecca was going through daily. But it gave Rebecca some distraction, having her sisters come over and being able to watch movies until late into the night. Those were really positive things for our girls because they could see her life, but also positive for Rebecca.
Yeah, I think that's, just meeting you on this podcast for this very first time. I think you guys hit the nail on the head on so many things in terms of using, developmentally appropriate bite-sized information to talk to Rebecca and involving the siblings, asking for help. I don't know if your mom volunteered or you asked, but that's something that I always tell my family is now is not the time to be prideful. This can't be done by one person and one person alone. And that means on the family side and also on the physician side. I mean, this is a team sport for everything. So asking for that help and getting what you need. I have a couple of questions I have in the back of my head, but something that you said brought up something that I think you can either choose to answer or not answer. But I think something that we don't talk a lot about with our families, or because we struggle with the time that we have in the clinic with our families. But something that you said is that you were switching off, and that the vision that it created was the ships in the night that happen with married couples or people that are in committed relationships. And osteosarcoma therapy for our listeners is usually about 9 or 10 months long. And sometimes those ships in the night can really just pass for that entire time. And something that we don't often talk about is how that affects partners that are in relationships, and how much stress that puts on a relationship, because it's dealing with a life-threatening illness and then all of that. And it's not something that's easy to bring up in an office visit, I would say. Like, hey, how are you guys doing? I'm not trying to get in your business, but this is kind of hard. You can't really bring it up at the beginning because you're just trying to get everything going, get the biopsy done, get the therapy started. Number one goal is to save your child's life, and that will always be our number one goal. But this still happens. And so I think there's a lot of people out there that struggle with that. And I don't know if that was something you guys struggled with, if you want to comment on it or not comment, or just say, yep, that happens. That would be, fine too. But it's just something we don't have. I don't really talk a lot about it in my office visits. I don't know how you feel, Lisa.
No, I did not ask them that. And
we talk about how stressful it is, but I mean, there's
right.
There's the kids, there's the school, there's the job, there's the marriage, there's, the in-laws moving in, and, all the things, Lisa.
All the things.
First, thankful that I have a very good relationship with my mom, as well as Jim has a good relationship with my mom. So there was no weird in-law stuff going on. The other thing is that a dear friend texted me when she found out about Rebecca, and she said something to the fact of, don't forget about your marriage. Don't let your marriage get lost in all of this. And someone else had said, make sure you have sex as much as possible. I don't know if we're allowed to say that on this podcast, but
yes,
all things
not a bad word.
Not a bad word.
No, I didn't mean that it was a bad word. I just mean that.
No, I just meant we have to censor bad words. So that is not a bad one.
No, and even though, some weeks felt like we were ships passing in the night, as much as we made sure the other girls felt like they were a priority, and Jim did a lot of, I did some too, but Jim did a lot of one-on-one time with the other two, going to a movie or taking a walk or whatever, that we made sure that we had time together and lots of sex.
Yeah. No, it's important to maintain all of those relationships in your life, whether they're your best girlfriend, your football buddy, whoever those people are, because cancer can consume your whole entire life. And it has a way of doing that. And I think everyone's intentions are good to deliver the care and the love and the things that the child needs. But at the end of the day, the family that existed before, I mean, our goal as oncologists is to have a healthy, happy survivor. And that doesn't just mean one person, because, people don't grow up in vacuums, and they need the things that they had before. So I think those are all really important points. And I think the reason I bring that up is not to put you on the spot since we just met, but I think that's the point of what we want to talk about on this podcast, is that there's so many things that we know that are affected. And there's so many things that we know people have questions about, and how do we actually get to those in a way that gives it sufficient time and in a way that's not super awkward. Because you might just want your CBC results that day and you don't really want to talk about the fight you had with, your other kids or whatever the heck is going on. And so how do we help tell people it's okay, these things happen and it's normal, and you're not the first one that's gone through this and that this has happened to. So I think that's why I put you on the spot.
I'll tell two stories.
Uh-oh.
So one is just developing a routine. And one of our routines was that no matter what I was doing, whether it was working on stuff for university or whatever, at 9:00 at night, I stopped. And I would come out of my office and I would walk into the kitchen and I would grab 2 wine glasses and I would pour a glass of wine at 9:00. And that was it. There was no more me doing my thing. At 9:00 every night, we knew if both of us were home, we were going to, watch something. And I think we probably indulged in a lot of brainless television watching.
Yes.
But it was sitting there together, having a glass of wine together, and just being present. So I think, and also, it's not like, and of course you know this, I don't have to tell this to you, but it's not like we're in the hospital all the time. So it's capitalizing on those times when you're not ships passing in the night and making sure in those off times that you are spending time together. And on the flip side, and kind of related to Hanneke and I is also with the sisters, is that trying to find ways to integrate what you're doing between all three. And just 2 examples of that. Of course, we're living in Arizona at the time, and it was February, and there was actually snow up in the mountains. And I decided to take the 2 older ones up into the mountains. And we grabbed sleds, which we had from where we lived previously, because you don't really need sleds in Arizona. And we went up into the mountains. And I was talking with Rebecca's sisters, and we're like, let's bring some snow back for Rebecca.
Aww.
So we jumped in the truck, went up the mountain, did some sledding with the girls. They had a blast. Got all wet from the snow and whatnot. And then right before we left, we found some clean snow. It was clean
No
snow.
yellow snow.
No yellow snow. And we packed it into a cooler and we brought it back down with us and walked in and opened it up, and Rebecca got to play in the snow.
Oh, that is so awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And then the other was, what was it, Marvel? There was a movie that came out.
That Catherine wanted to see at midnight?
Catherine wanted, no, it was one where I took all 3 of them. But only one of them really wanted to see it. But I was like, well, let's all do this together. And we brought Rebecca during one of her better weeks into the movie theater and got popcorn and gave them all that moment to experience something together as normal as possible. So finding those ways where you can kind of bring all of them together, where you can at least get it close enough to where they're doing stuff together or at least experiencing similar things.
I think that's good advice for partners and families with or without a cancer diagnosis. I think I could
Yeah.
probably take a cue from the stopping work at 9 p.m. and being more present for my own life. So I think those are all really great things. So going back to the original kind of early weeks of Rebecca's diagnosis, can you think of something that you wish you had access to or known what to ask in those very early weeks? And if you can't think of anything, it's also fine.
So it's hard for me, the emotional one, to describe, to really pinpoint what I needed. Because you go through what Jim called the looking glass, right? You realize, and in that moment when the radiologist for me used the word cancer, I knew in that moment something had changed. And I think it's interesting because you go through this almost like a sleepwalking phase, because you know you have to get to the next step. You don't know how you're going to do it. You don't know how you're going to come out of it. But everything in you screams, I just want things to be back to normal. And it's part of the process. It's a grieving part, I think. You grieve for the life that you had. Mm-hmm. You grieve for, the things that you had hoped and planned and dreamed for your family, for your daughter. And that's a normal part of the process, right?
Yes.
And then you get to you almost get into a routine of cancer, which is really weird. Your brain has not quite accepted this reality, but you have to keep going. And so you try to almost make the best of it and just move from one thing to the next. I'll tell you what, I don't know if necessarily I know what I would have wanted to know. I don't know if that makes sense. I do know what I didn't want to know. And what I didn't want, some of the things that happened to us were, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. No, actually, you don't know that it'll be fine. Don't tell me it's going to be fine. Mm-hmm. Lavender oil, just put that right on her leg and it'll make the tumor go right away. I'm not kidding you. This was told to us. Don't tell me about lavender oil, because if this amazing doctor that we had believed that lavender oil was just going to take the tumor right away, she wouldn't put my kid through chemotherapy.
Do you have any advice on what to tell these people, these good intentioned people?
So I think understanding that in situations of crisis, as humans, we don't know what to say or do. And I am a fixer, right? So
yes,
if someone is in crisis, I want to fix it. And so and I'm a doer. So whatever I can do to make their life a little bit easier, that's what I'm going to do. So if you understand that people don't really know when you say, hey, we just found out my kid had cancer. I mean, how do you even say that? Mm-hmm. And then for other people to understand that people don't know what to do with that. They don't know what to say. And often they say the wrong things. So in retrospect, I can go, this person didn't know what to say. So they said something that they thought might be helpful. You have to cover all that with a whole lot of grace.
I was just going to say that, give people some grace, yeah. Because they're trying to do their best to support you, yeah. Even though it's not helpful.
and even in that moment, I had to completely in my brain say, okay, this lavender oil and this sugar thing, I've checked with Dr. Cobb. She said we're good. So we're just going to take that and just remove it completely. Just, I can't spend any brain power on it because I have so many other things that I have to worry about and think about. I can't do that. And I think you mentioned earlier, in these moments you will find the good and the bad in people. And, those people that supported us, my mom came as quick as she could. And my sister came. My mom was traveling at the time that we found out. And so she couldn't come right in the second that she wanted to. So my sister came first for a week to support us. And then my mom came, and my dad said to me, what do you need? I said, I need mom. And he said, okay, she's staying. And that was that. There was no questioning or anything. She just stayed, for which we are so thankful. No, I lost my train of thought.
I think.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
So you will realize who your true friends are. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but those friends who you reach out to, people are going to text you like crazy, Facebook message you, try to call you. And for a long time, I put my phone on silent and I ignored every call. And those people that just said, hey, just know that we're thinking of you, know we're praying for you. Let us know what we can do. Those people who weren't taken aback by the fact that I didn't respond right away or I didn't pick up the phone, those were the people you knew you could count on. Didn't matter if I hadn't talked to them for a month and I called and said, hey, this is what I need right now, or this is what Rebecca needs, or this is what our family needs. Those are the people that you can count on. But there's a whole lot of grace that you have to give.
I think a way to respond to someone who is giving you bad advice or is saying things that are not helpful, and there's a lot, is just to ask them to stand in your puddle with you. Just stand in my puddle with me. That's all I need right now.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your input.
It's raining everywhere.
Please
right?
Just stand in my puddle with me.
Don't try to give me an umbrella. Don't try to give me rain boots. Just stand with me where I am.
I think we just found the title of episode 2. Stand in
my puddle.
Stand in my puddle. There it is.
I love it.
No, I think that is so
mm-hmm.
so important. And I do.
Great advice.
I think, giving people grace is can be challenging, and you guys sound like you are full of grace, and it
Sometimes.
is definitely needed.
To a certain extent, there was a lot of information given, especially at that initial meeting, that and I can tell you bits and pieces of that information, but it was so overwhelming that my brain shut down. So it's almost like I know what I don't need, but I don't know what I need, if that makes sense. Well, and to be clear, it wasn't Lisa that overwhelmed us with information. I remember so our first meeting was purely, look, we need to do a biopsy because it could be this or this. At the same time, I want you to get a port. And she talked about osteosarcoma and she talked about Ewing sarcoma and had a printout of both of them. It wasn't that information that was the dump. It was all the other stuff that came along with it, right? So in that meeting, we had a social worker, and that was information overload. I love our social worker. She's great. But it was, here are financial resources. Here are resources for medication. Here are resources for Make-A-Wish. And my brain would, what? We have done fundraisers as a family for Make-A-Wish. Make-A-Wish is only for kids who are dying. And so we are going to not even process that information because I kept saying to Jim, but we still have hope. We got to start chemotherapy. And so it was that information overload, all the other stuff that came along with it, that I really struggled with in that very first meeting.
So another thing that kind of wasn't expecting was what was the shot that she had to get at home?
The Neupogen.
Neupogen. And so as a veteran, I was trained at a certain point to give IVs to other soldiers, right? And shove it in there, pull the needle out, connect it up. Yeah, we're good to go. Doing that to your kid, completely different. Completely different. And so first we had no idea that this was going to be a thing, giving shots at home, and then not knowing how that was going to go down when you're standing there holding the needle and your daughter's laying there going, Dad, no.
Lightly decline this, Dad. Nothing.
Right. Hard pass. So I think the finding someone that we knew who was a nurse, who was maybe a bit separate from the family, friends of ours, but didn't really know Rebecca, who could come in and do that was really helpful. And I think psychologically helpful, probably for us as well. But also it at least provided that kind of buffer between Rebecca and the person who is giving the shot. I think when it was a family member coming at you with a needle, that doesn't work as well if you can find someone else who can do that for you.
Yeah, I think that's it's so variable. I think I have some patients that are older than Rebecca was that are like, like, no way. My mom is the only one who is allowed near me with that needle. And then some are like, I will run to the hills if my mom comes after me. And so I think it's very variable. And I have teenagers that are like, absolutely not. I'm going to do it, which is, I love that. And I love when they take that autonomy and they become an advocate for themselves. So there's all different types, but yeah, I can definitely predict what would go down in my family if we were in that situation, which would be similar.
From a more emotional mom perspective, I think too, for parents who are, whether this is an initial diagnosis, whether this is we're halfway through the process, or whether we've come out the other side, I think to always remember you are the number one advocate for your child. So asking those questions, even though you may get the feeling that the doctor has to see other patients, and that you know that there's a limited amount of time, but never to be afraid to ask those questions, and never be afraid to stand up for your child, and what you believe is best. Now, I'm not talking about things like lavender oil. I'm talking about, like, always ask the question, what happens if I give her a candy bar instead of a carrot?
Mm-hmm.
Or,
Yeah.
hey, is this procedure really necessary? And if it is, explain to me why it's necessary. And especially, now having seen doctors in 3 different cultures, where we live currently, you do not question the doctor. And that has been a huge cultural shift for me. I still do, because that's what I have now been trained to do. But, the surgeon came to us and said, okay, here are the 3 problems that I see, and we're going to do all that. So let's schedule a date. And I said, wait, hold on. A, what are the 3 problems? B, do we have to tackle all 3 at the same time? Those are 3 major surgeries, and let's talk about some alternatives. So speaking up for your child, because you ultimately know your child the best. And then especially, like if you're in the middle of the treatment, okay, so now the doctor's round, and it's not just your oncologist, it's the charge nurse and the nutritionist and whoever else is in that group. Be a part of that conversation. We were really lucky to be where Rebecca was treated, in a hospital where parents were invited to be part of that conversation and asked, hey, how did her night go? What was her reaction to this or that? And to be part of that conversation. Maybe that's the control freak part, but to really understand and really advocate for your child is really important things.
Yeah. No, I think you hit the nail on the head there, especially when it comes to children, even some young adults, in the older teenage range. And for me personally, I never understood what my mom said when she would tell me I had sick eyes when I was younger. Like, I would come home from school and she'd be like, you have sick eyes. I'm like, what does that mean? And now I know exactly what that means, because it's that thing that as a mom or a dad or a caregiver or guardian, when there's something just not quite right with your kid. Like, you knew something just wasn't quite right with her knee. And you as a physician, we can't know that because we don't live with these kids. We don't, kiss every boo-boo that they have. Like, that's your job. And so that's your job to tell us when they have sick eyes.
Mm-hmm.
That's your job. And so
Yeah.
I think that's so important. And we don't know when they have sick eyes, if they don't have a fever, if you don't tell us that, something's wrong. And I would say 80 to 95% of the time, those things that, moms and dads bring to us, we find something. And then there's times where I've done scans and I'm like, I don't know what it was. It just wasn't there. But you know what? Now we know. And I think those conversations are the ultimate key to that advocacy for your child.
Yeah. Just trust your knowing and don't be afraid to speak up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
No, it's great advice.
Yeah. Well, I know that you guys need to get on with your day, but I am so, so grateful that you've taken all this time and sat with us and told us your story. And we'll be thinking of Rebecca this week as you guys are waiting. But yeah, this has been so kind of enlightening for me to listen to a story from the other side, and so helpful. And I think, um, I hope that if somebody is listening in the future, once we get this all put together, courtesy of Lisa Kopp, that it at least lets people know that all of these feelings, the fear, the anxiety, the uncertainty, the anger, anger is also an okay emotion when your world falls apart. And then getting through to the other side, whatever that side looks like, with, grace and humility on both, the parent, the child, the doctor side, that they're not alone, because it can feel very lonely at the beginning. I imagine.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much, because I can't imagine having to go through this or all the emotions it brings up just to talk about it again. And now you've talked about it again with me twice. And I know it has to be emotionally really hard and draining. And we so appreciate you doing this. And I know so many people are going to find this conversation really helpful. So thank you so much. We're really grateful for you guys. Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or find us at sarcomasisters.com and drop us a note. If you enjoyed our podcast, please share with a friend. Thanks so much. Till next time.